I am the greatest.
I wish I was 50 years younger and I'd kick your ass.
You won't do shit. Just stick and move. And like you understand, now stick and move. Keep your hands up.
Welcome to a new episode of the Stick and Move podcast. I'm your host, Trey, here with my co-host, Sam. And today we are discussing the top 3 90s boxers of that decade/era. Such a phenomenal time. Before we get into that, Sam, just punch me in the face. Who's your number 3 greatest 90s boxer? Go for it.
It's going to be Oscar De La Hoya. I think Oscar De La Hoya is my number 3. I mean, of course, there was a lot of great boxers in the 90s. But I'm going to pick the ones that I was watching the most. And Oscar De La Hoya, man. I mean, the guy fought everybody, anybody, at any time, at any place. The guy was a great boxer. You know, he Olympic gold. I mean, the Golden Boy. I mean, the guy was just it was a pleasure to see his fights. That he had one, or the ones he lost, the ones he's won through the 90s. I mean, the guy was a superstar, bro. The guy, he like Floyd, he owned Vegas. You know what I'm saying? And the people, people watched him since the Olympics, followed his whole career. And he was a highlight in the 90s. There's no doubt about it.
I'll say this too, dude. If I'm not mistaken, in the 90s, I think he accumulated over $100 million, brother, in the 90s, just fighting in that. And I think out of the 10 titles he won, if I'm not mistaken, he won 5 of them. Could I be off on that? I could be off on that. Just going off the top of my head. But, De La Hoya, yeah, dude, he carried. Well, the 90s is so interesting to me because the 80s left off going into the 90s, kind of like when Michael Jordan retired. Who was going to take over Michael Jordan, right? When Tyson fell apart and went to jail, people were asking, who's going to take over? And, bro, the 90s definitely covered it. Everywhere from Cesar Chavez, I don't know if he's on your list, De La Hoya, Roy Jones Jr., Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield. I mean, the 90s was spectacular. Trinidad. I mean, even Corte was fun to watch. Pernell Whitaker was phenomenal to watch. The 90s was a magical time during this era. So I love that you have De La Hoya as your number 3.
So who's your number 3?
I'm going to go with, hey guys, Trey here. If you love today's controversial episode and you want to see our channel grow, please drop a like, subscribe, and also comment. Sam and I are always going back and forth with those commenters on our controversial topics and opinions, and we love it so much. So go ahead and hit that like button. Hit that subscribe, most importantly, so our channel can grow and we can give you guys the best content as possible. Sam and I were always uploading multiple videos a week, and we want to continue doing that, and we need your help. So go ahead and subscribe, guys. And most importantly, like I always say, don't forget to stick and move, baby. With Lennox Lewis, man. Now, the reason why look, dude, he only had one loss in the 90s, and being a heavyweight going almost undefeated in one decade is unheard of, and that's exactly what he did when he got that one knockout by Oliver McCall. I mean, this is a guy, bro, that, if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to look at my notes here. Dude, he beat guys like Morrison. He beat Galata in the first round, if I'm not mistaken. He beat the up-and-coming Shannon Briggs at the time. I mean, he took out Holyfield when Holyfield was like, also, like you said, De La Hoya, the face of the heavyweight division. And, dude, he mopped the floor with them. Both fights. I know he got the split decision on one of them, on the first fight. But, dude, there was a time where I was like, is this guy ever going to lose again? I mean, it took a lucky shot by McCall to take him down, but he was such a dominant force. And it's a shame that because he was in the European market, he didn't really cross over that well to the American side. But when he was starting to fight American fighters, he was just chopping them up to pieces. If he was American born, in my opinion, I honestly think that he would be in a lot of people's top 5, top 3 boxers of all time if he had more of
Mhm.
that American birthright. Sadly, so that's why he is my number 3. You have any thoughts on Lennox Lewis?
Yeah, the guy dominated, man. Lennox Lewis,
Right,
Lennox Lewis was slow key, bro. The boogeyman, honestly.
right.
Yeah,
He
he
fought
was low
everybody
key.
too.
Yeah, he was low key the boogeyman. He was the one that everybody thought, could Holyfield beat Lennox? Could Mike Tyson beat Lennox? Because we knew that Lennox was really, really good, man. And but I get it. As a number 3 in the '90s, Lennox Lewis was unstoppable, man. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? He was a threat, and he was a lot of people didn't want to fight him because the
Hmm.
guy knew how to box. The guy had
Right.
reach. He had power. And he was
Hmm.
coached well.
Right.
And he had Manny Stewart, bro.
He
And
did. He
people,
did actually.
yeah, he had Manny Stewart, and people just feared him. So I get why you got him number 3.
And let's not forget, he wouldn't lose, I think, until 2002 to Rockman, also just by getting caught. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a guy that, dude, his size, also up there. One of the greatest stiff jabs of all
Oh,
time. And he was just, yeah, go ahead.
we got to
Yeah, he
do
was just,
we got to do a Lennox Lewis versus '70s, man.
yeah. And that's coming soon. That's coming soon for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
All right, my man. So give me your number 2 greatest 90s boxer.
Oh man, how could we all ignore the fact in the '90s that Roy Jones ran it, bro? I mean, the guy is Superman, bro. When I would see him fight, it was just unbelievable how his style of the way he goes and throws, a hook across the ring and knocks people out, leaving his guard down so the guy can open up and then being caught. I mean, Roy Jones he was like, when he fought, bro, it was like a circus coming into town. You
Right,
know what I'm
right,
saying?
right.
Everybody wanted to see the show. I mean, the guy had power, speed,
Hmm.
charisma, personality. I mean, what can you hate about him? I mean,
Hmm.
the guy was just, dude, he owned the '90s, man. I mean, I
Hmm.
can't think of boxing without having Roy Jones Jr. in it. When you talk about the whole era in the decades before and to the present, Roy Jones is one of the best ever, and we got to see him in the '90s, and he controlled it.
Uh, I will agree with that. I think he actually picked up the slack to what I said the last one, where we're looking for who's going to replace the face of boxing and Mike Tyson. It was Roy Jones over Evander Holyfield, over Lennox Lewis, over the comeback of George Foreman, even over Tommy Morrison. You know what I mean? Um, these are just examples, bro. I mean, Roy Jones, in my opinion, he actually changed the style of boxing, kind of like how Muhammad Ali changed the style for boxing for heavyweights. He did the same thing. He was doing stuff that was unheard of in the boxing ring, and yet he controlled it. So I like your number 2, my man.
All right, and what about your number 2?
Look, I got Ricardo Finito Lopez, bro, my number 2. Now, look,
Oh, okay,
this
okay.
guy, yeah. Considered what probably the greatest flyweight of all time. And this is a guy, bro, you can arguably say that he also dominated in the early 80s, in the mid 80s, going into the 90s. I mean, he is one of 15 fighters or 14 fighters who's never had a defeat. I mean, this is a guy who also did a lot of fights in Asia, beating guys like Rocky Lin and Wang Suo and I'm trying to remember the other guy. He has a strange name, Saman Sorja Turang, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, beat Pretty Boy Lucas. I don't know if you remember that, but this is a guy, Ricardo Finito Lopez, who's often forgotten in the lure of the flyweights and the bantamweights and the lightweights era, especially going into the 90s. so much was going on during that decade that he is often forgotten, and I think he deserves more respect, which is why I put him at my number 2. You have any thoughts on that?
Yes, man. I've seen the guy fight many times. He had a beautiful style.
Oh, dude.
Dude, he was an architect. He would when you would see him box. I mean, when you're gonna learn how to box or teach a kid how to box, man, you got to see Finito Lopez. I mean, he was a smaller version, my opinion, smaller version of Alexis Arguello. Alexis Arguello.
Okay.
He was a smaller version of Alexis Arguello, to my opinion.
Right.
A smaller version of Salvador Sanchez, and the guy attacked. He had power from a small frame. He's an unsung hero. He went undefeated. The guy was just master, bro. He was a master boxer.
You took it out of my mouth. He reminded me, his style, of Salvador Sanchez. Very, very aggressive, but at the same time, man, his footwork, his head movement. I loved his defense, which is why he was literally unbeatable. And it just bothers me that he's forgotten in the lure of all-time great fighters. I'm actually happy that many sources have named him the greatest flyweight of all time. So
yes,
that is my number 2. Talk to me. Who is your number 1 and why?
Well, my number 1 is it's obvious. The guy, I mean, the roller coaster ride he took us through the 90s. Okay?
Talk to me, bro.
I mean, but dude, when it comes to 90s boxing, he is the king of the 90s boxing, bro, and it's Iron Mike Tyson.
Wow,
really?
Whoa.
Mike Tyson. Yeah, Iron Mike Tyson, bro. The guy is the 90s.
I was going to rip his heart out. I'm the best ever. I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been. There's no one can stop me. Lennox is a conqueror. No, I'm Alexander. He's no Alexander. I'm the best ever. There's never been anybody ruthless. I'm Sonny Liston. I'm Jack Dempsey. There's no one like me. I'm from Nairclaw. There's no one that can match me. My style is impetuous. My defense is impregnable. And I'm just ferocious. I want your heart. I want to eat your children. Praise be to Allah.
When you look up 90s, bro, his face is there. I mean,
wow.
the guy it was spectacular boxing fights. Who's going to beat him? They made a video game out of him. Back in the day, bro, he was the baddest man, considered the baddest man on the planet. And there was no argument about that. I mean, the guy was 19 years old, whatever it was, knocking out, becoming champion, blah, blah, blah. I mean, his arrogance, the way he fought was ferocious. He was taught by Cazamato. I mean, the guy was just a straight killer in the ring, bro. And we knew it was gonna be a 1-round fight, bro. But we still paid for it. We still wanted to see it. The guy was the face of the 90s. He is the king of the 90s, bro, in my opinion.
Now listen. Bro, you're killing me, bro. I'll say this, man. Look, Tyson, without a doubt, is the face of the 90s, late 80s for sure. Oh, bro, but the reason why I don't have him my number 1 is because of a lot of the criticism you have said. And, people have said this over and over. He was a bum basher, brother. You know what I'm saying? When he fought the big fights in the 90s against Lewis and against Holyfield, you can arguably say he lost every single one of those fights, round by round, every single round of those fights. But I see what you're saying because, dude, he was everywhere, man. Even when he was in prison, every other day in the boxing world was talking about, oh, how is he training? Imagine when he comes out of the prison, his prison sentence, he's gonna be a 10 times better fighter. He's gonna be a street fighter now. Well, he was always a street fighter, and he's just gonna be even more dangerous than he was. And you can arguably say when he was fighting those first fights before his big ones out of prison, he was untouchable, man. He was untouchable. So I'm okay with him being your number 1. Go ahead.
I want to add something, to let everybody know, all our friends that we have in this community, in this channel. I want to tell you something. One of my greatest heavyweight fights that I've ever seen in my life was George Foreman and Muhammad Ali.
Right.
My second best heavyweight fight I've ever seen in my life. And I because I can never ever forget it, because me and my brothers, being kids, we saw it. We couldn't believe who, we're like, who is this Razor Ruddock guy? Who is this Jamaican dude?
Right.
Bro, that had to be one of the greatest heavyweight bras, size versus a small Kid Dynamite. I mean, dude, it was one of the greatest heavyweight. That was one of the greatest fights. Forget boxing, forget all that. It was two guys that were out to kill each other. Yeah, they were. It was one of the greatest heavyweight fights I ever seen in my life, bro. And when I saw what Tyson did to him, and Razor Ruddock fought back. What I saw Tyson do to him, it just that solidified to me that Mike Tyson is the king, and that was it. And there was no argument. And that's when people started talking about what would Tyson do, versus Muhammad Ali and blah, blah, blah. And all these fantasy fights started popping up. But Mike Tyson, bro, he's my number one, and I'm very, happy putting him there in that position.
Well, there's a lot of people. Speaking of that Razor Ruddock fight, I remember the billing saying the Razor versus Kid Dynamite. That was pretty cool. Two of the coolest nicknames of all time. I had Razor Ruddock, my favorite nickname ever. But, bro, that's one of those fights, bro, where it was bang, bang. And there are a few boxing historians that actually believe that Ruddock maybe did not win the fight, but deserved that rematch where that fight was, not even close the second time they fought. Unanimous decision for Mike Tyson. But yeah, dude, that was a cool fight right there. Awesome. So I'm cool with that being your number one.
Yeah, so who's your number one?
And look, bro, mine is Roy Jones also. Well, Roy Jones was your number two. Roy Jones Jr. was my number one, exactly for what you just said. I mean, this is a guy who went the entire 90s, goes into the Olympics, gets robbed. Usually when you get robbed like that, for some boxers, they don't come back in the Seoul Olympics. Comes throughout the 90s, wipes out, goes completely undefeated. He loses by disqualification to Montel Griffin, avenges that fight, destroys James Toney. Who else was the other one?
Hopkins.
Virgil Hill takes him out. Takes out Hopkins as well when Hopkins was up and coming. This is a guy that dominated the circuit. He was also one of the first ones, for some reason, where when I thought of Roy Jones, yeah, he would also go to heavyweight, but that was in the 2000s. I'll say this too. He was the first boxer I remember having a sponsorship outside of boxing. You know what I'm saying? Like Michael Jordan was on his pants, and I was like, man, that is so cool. And Roy Jones Jr., he carried the throne for what we thought we were going to get from Mike Tyson. He carried it all the way through. Let me ask you a question, because when we did the Roy Jones overrated episode, some comments were saying that in the 90s, that's where he fought nothing but bums, which is why a lot of people say that he's overrated. It wasn't until the 2000s where he was fighting actual good competition. What do you think about that?
I think his prime was the 90s. His prime was the 90s. He beat everybody that was put in front of him. I mean, in spectacular fashion, bro. I mean, there's no way Roy Jones is overrated, brother. The guy he's a champion. He's a legend. He left his mark. It was his own style. I mean, the guy was just a spectacular fighter, man. I don't think he's overrated at all.
Phenomenal showman. That Cobra jab that he had was spectacular, bro. Even doing the windmill in the ring, something we hadn't seen since Sugar Ray Leonard. I mean, this guy, he was a showman, he was a performer, and best of all, bro, he was a champion. So you have any final words for this episode before we sign off?
It was a great episode, man. There's a lot of other great 90s fighters that we left out. Barrera, Morales, Mayweather, everybody. And
so who's the guy that you left off? Like, who could have been your number 3?
My number 3
or your 3B.
Yeah, my in the 90s, dude. I mean Chavez. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like Chavez, bro. Like, are we gonna forget about Chavez?
Did he beat Taylor in the 90s?
Yeah, who else did we have in the 90s?
Controversially.
Yeah, controversially.
There was Trinidad. There was I'm looking at my notes. Whitaker.
Pernell Whitaker.
Yeah.
Pernell Whitaker, man. Also, man. I mean, the guy was like, but it's just these guys that I mentioned, at least on my behalf, these are guys that lit up Vegas, bro.
You
know what I'm saying?
I love that.
They lit up Vegas. Mike Tyson, Roy Jones, these guys, Oscar De La Hoya, they lit up Vegas.
You're not wrong,
you know what
man.
I'm saying? The world came in to watch people from all over the world. Before the internet, people all over the world knew who Mike Tyson was. All over the world. Right. His name ran, everywhere. So that's why, I had to pick these guys over a lot of other great boxers.
Right. Well, we'll leave it at that, my man. Like Sam also said, go ahead and like and subscribe, leave comments. We're always here trying to comment as much as we can possibly. And like I always like to say, don't forget to stick and move, baby.
I am the greatest. I wish I was 50 years younger and I